Hey guys, just another off the cuff commentary here on my reading today. My Bible reading today was Genesis 1 through 3, and there were a lot of cool things, especially in the Bible I'm reading through this year, which is the Cultural Background Study Bible. I keep keep getting it confused with the Archaeological Study Bible, which is another great study Bible, but that's not what this is. It's Cultural Background Study Bible. One of the things that I really gleaned from reading through Genesis this time is that oftentimes Genesis 1 through 3, especially as of late, has become a battleground for scientific interpretation versus narrative and literary interpretation and legendary interpretation and all these things when it comes to interpreting the Bible. Is it science? Is it literature? Is it whatnot? Well, leaving the scientific part out of it, although I do think that's important. Don't have time to talk about everything that Genesis 1 through 3 could talk about. But I did like how this Bible focused on the literary parts of it, because there are a lot of things in there that I'd never seen before. And it was pretty cool how it compared and contrasted things with some of the ancient Near East cultures, which was different from, it was pretty cool. Let me open up some of my notes here. I took a good 3 pages of notes as I sat through here and thought and contemplated. I'm sorry, 2 pages worth of notes here. It was pretty neat how this brought out different things from Egyptian lore, which would probably be relevant. Because we don't have to be afraid of that as Christians, because Moses, obviously was delivering Israelites out of Egypt. And some of their Egyptian lore could have been used as kind of a frame of reference, but not, while Moses was writing these things out. And even if you believe like I do, that God inspired every word of the Bible, when we look at this concept of absolute truth, we would expect to see, if anybody had any religious background whatsoever, whether they were pagan or Jewish or Christian or or what have you, these ancient Near East religions, you would expect for them to have nuggets of truth in them, and this archaeological study Bible was good about doing that. It commented a lot using the Gilgamesh epics and things like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the comments and that and things. It was pretty neat. I made a note here on chapter 1. It said that, bearing similarities with ancient Egyptian lore, Genesis 1 describes the creation narrative as a work of God work of God bringing the earth out of a primordial state into something beautiful. That wasn't a comment from the scripture. That was just something I thought of, that God basically took things out of this void, this darkness, and said, in the beginning. What the beginning means is not totally clear. We just know that God created something out of nothing. and that's what God does all the time. He's done that in my life. I know that, because the things I were living for before I encountered Christ were going to amount to nothing, basically, in the grand scheme of things. But God took my life and has done something totally different with it, and I am glad that my life has ultimate meaning to it now. And that's just something God wants to do. He wants to take the nothingness and make it beautiful, and I feel like he's done that in my own personal life. So I found that to be just an intriguing thought. As I was going through there were some but that all being said, there were some obscurities and things that I'd never thought about, some like compares and contrasts, if you will. One of those is where ancient religions in the ancient Near East did not emphasize childbearing. Genesis 1 actually encourages it, which was countercultural. Ancient Near East culture stressed that the multiplication of people would result in a multiplication of problems. An example, plagues, violence, noise, things of that nature. And so that gives us a little bit more context of why some of these ancient Near East cultures that the Jews encountered in the Torah were more or less killing their children and so on. Like humans didn't really have a lot of value to them, whereas the Jewish people saw humans as having intrinsic value, being made in the image of God, and that was a very countercultural idea. Um, and in that being made in the image of God, here's a new idea that Judaism, that God introduced through Judaism to humanity, is that humans were granted the role of king and their responsibilities. And whereas people were created in, to serve the king in ancient Near East cultures, Judaism here is emphasizing that we are to serve the king, of God himself. And and that trickles down into this, this idea of polytheism and these anthropomorphized gods that were very human-like in the ancient polytheistic traditions. The Judeo-Christian God was ontologically separate, and was, far and above creation. So these ancient Near East gods were, because they're so human-like, were always hungry. And so the people that these gods had created, and the people that were being the worshipers of these ancient Near East religions, were always bringing food offerings and things like that. And that's still going on, by the way, in a lot of Eastern cultures, that there's food offerings being made every day in temples near me here in Houston. But forgot, this was an interesting comment, where the ancient Near East gods were always hungry. Food was always grown for them. In contrast, the Jewish God provided for his creation. And this would be a new idea in ancient Near East theology. Our God is, and this was my comment, our God is Jehovah Jireh, our God, our provider. And so some more contrast were these poetic contrast within again, this Epic of Gilgamesh and other Egyptian things. And I'm sure there's more in other ancient cultures. And this is, again, not to say that Christianity borrowed from any of these things, or that the Bible borrowed from any of these things. And we're talking about an idea of absolute truth here. And absolute truth is not anything that is to be invented or borrowed. It is something to be discovered, and is something to be used. And so what Moses is laying out here, it's like these religious people, they had these ideas, but here's the fulfillment. Here is the truth behind it. And I'm willing to argue that. You're welcome to post anything and throw an argument up there. If you disagree with that, that's fine. Throw it up there. We'll have at it. But it was interesting how in chapter 2, verse 9 mentions the tree of life. And this is actually an idea that's found in many ancient Near East religious contexts. The Epic of Gilgamesh had a plant of rejuvenation at the bottom of the cosmic river. Enkidu becomes wise also. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, as it says, like, this was the purpose of the tree, was for Adam and Eve to become wise like God. Well, Enkidu becomes wise by sexual intercourse with prostitutes. So it's obviously a major contrast there. It's very different. Where there's a lot of people that try to say that Genesis, the tree was the fruit of the tree was sexual intercourse, and it's just not what they're doing there. Is they're not quoting the Bible, they're quoting the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Bible is very clear that this is not, there's nothing in the Bible that indicates that sex was the forbidden fruit of the tree. But the Epic of Gilgamesh does comment that. So we need to check our sources. The only way that you could come up with that in a biblical context is if you're trying to read into the text instead of doing an exegesis. You're doing an eisegesis, reading in, instead of doing an exegesis, which is saying, what does the text say? And that's what we need to be doing. So I could talk about so many things here, but we're going to try to keep this video as short as we can. Genesis 1 through 3 is the basic. It's the setup. It's foundational theology for all the Bible. There's so many things that go on there. God is made in the image of God, so we got the doctrine of the Imago Dei right there. Man is made in the image of God. We've got redemption within that. We've got the fall within that, the condition of mankind, and why Jesus died on the cross in the first place. And rose from the dead is in Genesis 1 through 3. The idea of marriage, the idea of family, there's all kinds of things packed into Genesis 1 through 3. You could do a several video series. Many people have on Genesis 1 through 3. We're trying to keep it in its context here. We're trying to keep it, I'm sorry, not in its context, but in trying to keep it short and sweet as possible here. And this idea, though, of going back and forth on being like God, which is the sin of Adam and Eve. They were wanting to be like God. So this was the problem, but it's an ancient expression, also not uncommon to ancient Near East culture. It's usually referring to, and I like this too, it's usually referring to being like God in splendor. And that's true in some ways, that we are like God in splendor. We have reasoning and cognitive faculties, and that's a beautiful thing. We are made with intrinsic beauty because we're made by the hand of God, even from the womb. There are so many things, and this is all these Christian worldview things that I was just talking about this earlier with somebody, that beauty is a Christian truth. It is a Christian fact that beauty is not even so much in the eyes of the beholder, but beauty itself is good evidence that a God exists, because how would we know things are beautiful unless there was a standard in which to judge them by? That standard is God. So moving on, that was a quick one, but we're moving on. I don't have time to expound on all this, but so again, this Epic of Gilgamesh, this is interesting to me. Adapa fails to achieve immortality because of him not being able to eat necessary food as well. It's another proof of like what is to come with Christianity, and it being, if Adam and Eve did exist historically, you would almost expect to see other ancient Near East traditions commenting along the same lines, and that's a position that you're welcome to take along with me. Adapa also gains wisdom from a woman who gives understanding, and he also encounters a snake. Isn't that interesting? And and I found this, years ago. I was working in a juvenile detention center as a minister, and I don't think I'm breaking any HIPAA guidelines by sharing this, but there's a young man there. Oh goodness, and this would have been 10 years ago. So don't even remember the kid's name. I don't think he was allowed to give me his name, but he sat me down and was talking about these things that he kept seeing that protected him, but they looked scary. They looked terrifying. And he said, I believe they were angels. And he started describing these angels. And some of these angels were absolutely huge that would stand over his house. And he could have very well been paranoid schizophrenic. He could, who knows? I'm not a psychiatrist. But this is the first time I'd ever encountered something that described angels outside of Isaiah. There are those 4 angels with eyes, all over their body, and in Revelation 2. And one of them had the head of a lion, head of an eagle, so on and so forth, body of a man. But the cherubim that were actually described that guarded the gate going into the Garden of Eden would have been described as angels that were, cherubim are not always beautiful. Sometimes they're pretty terrifying, as we saw in those others I just mentioned. But these would have most likely, given the context of the day and the word that is used there in Hebrew, these would have most likely been angels who had animal-like heads with human-like bodies. They were terrifying guardian angels, if you will, and they were put there to guard those things. And it's, there's just so much in Genesis 1 through 3. I think the most important thing we could take away, though, is very simply this: God created all things from nothing. And you can get into all the little details about, was that 7 literal days? Was that over millions of years? Was that over it? All of that is subordinate to understanding that God created. We are fallen, and he wants to redeem. And he started that plan of redemption just as soon as he started the plan of redemption just as soon as man fell. And he has fulfilled it pretty wonderfully. And I'm thankful to be part of that he takes nothing and makes it something. And if that wasn't the truth, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. So God bless you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Looking forward to sending you another one in the next day or two. God bless you.